Good evening, everyone. Here from the Temple of Silence in the Helsinki area of Finland. And tonight I'm substituting for Tuija. And we'll take a look at some reading from the Destiny of the Nations. It's been a little while since we've read from that book. And also, we'll take a look at the meaning of patriotism and what role it plays in our thinking, where our loyalties lie, and how it can be best expressed. So this our readings here are from the Destiny of the Nations. And let's see where we are here. We're around page 30. It's taken a little while for us to get here, but we will continue to work understanding as we can what Master DK thought was important for international relations when he wrote this book, quite a bit of it after the Second World War. It's not a long book, and we're somewhere near the halfway point, but we'll go slowly and carefully. He began, last time we talked, we were talking about the incoming seventh ray and its contrast with the outgoing sixth ray. Now the sixth ray is producing, through those who adhere strenuously to it, beyond its time almost, it's producing a sort of a fanatical adherence to the past, a reactionary attitude, not just a conservative attitude trying to preserve that which is good from the past, but a reaction against the possibilities of the incoming seventh ray, which seems to threaten so much of what the sixth ray people, whether through personality or through soul, are trying to hang on to. The seventh ray, however, is progressive, and it will in fact produce those new forms under the planet Uranus, and new ceremonies under the planet Jupiter, and the archetypes which are so often covered by the conditions or the conditioning that humanity has allowed itself, will be expressed more vividly. So they are very enthusiastic about that, and there's many seventh ray souls coming in, just as there are many sixth ray souls on the point of departure to an inner place where further education is possible until it becomes possible for the sixth ray to come in once again. So, people like ourselves, we tend to think that we are working with the indications of the seventh ray. Now these two rays, from their monadic aspect, are in somewhat of a conflict or contention. The various monadic types, and there are 7, will contrast with the seventh ray, and only the sixth ray monads, those of the, the mystically inclined and those who don't care so much about manifestation upon the physical plane, they will be at odds with the seventh ray indications. Others can work out an accommodation. So there are the reactionaries, there are the progressives, and finally there are those who are confused. They stand in the middle, and millions of people, as it says here, who do not respond to either of the above influences through egoic or personality relation, it throws them into a state of bewilderment. They feel entirely lost, are gripped by the idea that life holds for them no desirable future. We see the excuse me. We see the despair of many young people who are suicidally inclined, and they think there's nothing worth living for. So no desirable future, and all that they have learned to cherish and hold dear is rapidly failing them. So those are the three types that are responding to the incoming seventh ray and sixth ray departure. So let's we'll move on a little bit here. These three groups of people, influenced by the sixth and seventh rays, or who are bewildered by the impact of forces generated by those rays, planetary forces and other reductions of the rays, are those who must, together with understanding and clear vision, bring order out of the present chaos. And I must say, I don't really think that the present chaos has much subsided. I think not. Let me just get this correct. Yep. In case I want to write something in here, yeah. So, the energies are changing, basically. And I don't know if we notice this, those of us who are more up in years, when comparing the energies available to us at an earlier time, but they are definitely changing, and we are in that overlap period when both the Piscean and growing Aquarian energy are more effective. Piscean energy fading, pretty much fading by the end of this century, and the rays presently associated with those signs, namely sixth ray with Pisces and seventh ray with Aquarius, are coming, are either waning, sixth ray, or becoming stronger as the zodiacal sign with which they are associated becomes stronger. Now, it's not that when Aquarius appears, you always have to have the appearance of the seventh ray. You can have in that 2,500-year cycle any of the rays appearing with Aquarius. And it is also true that although the sixth ray is prominent in Pisces, giving it that devoted adherence to what satisfies the emotions, that the other rays also can come into being during a 2,500-year cycle. So many people are bewildered, others know what they're fighting for and fighting against, and all together with, if possible, and you can see that the fight is great, with understanding and clear vision, they have to bring order out of the present chaos. They must materialize those new and desirable conditions which will conform to the subjective pattern in the minds of the illumined people of the world. You know, it's more the seventh ray in a way that we're talking about, and the clearing away of the resistant reactionary forms which do not lead really into the new age, though it's always advisable under the fourth ray to preserve, for the sake of continuity, that which is useful and of value from the past. So the subjective pattern, well, think of the archetypal pattern, which has such a difficulty fighting its way into manifestation because there are so many forms of a different nature which resist it. Anyway, the new and more desirable conditions conforming to the archetypes which are somewhat understood by the more illumined people of the world, they have to be materialized, these archetypes, and to the spiritual plan as it exists in the consciousness of the members of the hierarchy. This is what we have to learn to be sensitive to. We're not trying to rebuild the old buildings and recreate the old forms as if the last word of revelation with respect to contact with divinity had been spoken. And, you know, people are trapped thinking that in their particular religion the last word has been spoken. The New Age, with its peculiar civilization and culture, will be brought into manifestation through the collaboration of the well-intentioned many. You know, sounds here like they are animated by goodwill, responsive increasingly to the good of the whole and not of the individual, and that's a major glamour issue going on in the world today. People are attracted immensely by their own desire body and think of themselves oftentimes as the center of that which goes on in their consciousness and all around them. So it's the good of the whole and not just of the individual. That's what we have to look forward to. They are the idealistic but practical thinkers. DK is giving us a picture of what we should become, having preserved the best that the sixth ray has given us, and not forgetting that the word of power for the seventh ray is the highest and the lowest meet. So there is idealism in that seventh ray, but the meeting upon the physical plane of the two. They are the idealistic but practical thinkers, influenced by the pattern of things to come. So, you know, that's intuition, that is faith, the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. And world disciples, okay? And the world disciples generally are considered to be initiates of the third degree, impressed by the plans and under the instruction of the hierarchy which is directing and controlling all. This is what is desirable, and to the extent that we can participate in it, then we are really helping to bring the plan to earth, to the dense physical plane. It is with these three groups of people and with the work upon which they are engaged that any prevision which I may evidence will consistently deal. All changes in connection with the human family, the fourth kingdom, and nature are always dependent upon three factors. And I think we, after a little review here, we can go ahead and look at what these three factors are, because change is really required. Change for the better. And, if you know something about the energies, definitely you will recognize that some of the changes which have been occurring are definitely for the better. I keep on seeing how the carbon-based fuels, the coal and oil, basically, are under threat. The use of these particular types of fuel is under threat by the emerging forms of clean energy, some of it atomic, some of it powered by the wind, or water power, or, the ending up to provide us with electrical cars and those vehicles whose exhaust is not lethal to the breathing of the human being. Already you can see that this is happening in this overlap period. So anyway, changes are what we are looking for. And the age of Aquarius is said to be an age of great change. So, what are these factors? And we see here those outer physical events, which are definitely acts of God, or of His hierarchy, volcanoes and earthquakes and maybe floods and tidal waves and things like that in the department of the Manu, particularly. And there are other types of more subtle events, but we're looking at the things that are really changing the geography, the topography of our planet, and they are directed from within. And DK talks about the tremendous earth changes which will be taking place in the next thousands of years. So, 1,000 years really. They are definitely acts of God, and over which no human being has the slightest authority. So we just don't know, one day if the Rosicrucian cosmoconception is accurate, there will be a rising of a great continent in the Pacific Ocean, and maybe it will be a central home to the members of a kind of seventh root race. If we go along that far, maybe it will be called Pacifica. It suggests an era of peace. Well, those are going to be tremendous changes required if that kind of rising is going to occur. Then there's the activity of human beings themselves, working on all the different rays, but in any given time and in any particular period, conditioned by the preponderance of egos to be found on any particular ray. So there are a very large number of second-ray egos in incarnation today, and their work and their lives will facilitate the coming great approach. I think we can understand that we're still in a considerable 500-year cycle which began in 1575. Anyway, page 26 of the Esoteric Psychology 1 will give us the starting points there. And I think this 500-year cycle, we're in the latter part of it, but it goes until the year 2075. So this century, and these are the teachers and the builders or rebuilders of that which has been destroyed in the constant warring condition of humanity, and especially the great Second World War. So, human beings here, I think what I'll do is just note that. And, yeah. Then there's the nature and quality of the predominating personality rays of the majority. Here's where he tells us, it's going to be either predominantly the sixth ray or the third. At this time, there are a vast number of souls in incarnation whose personality rays are either the sixth or the third. Now, that's really something worth remembering, because we might think that it's just as likely to have any type of ray for the personality as any other type of ray, but he he gives us the preponderance here. The vast number of souls in incarnation whose personality rays are either the sixth or the third. So, devotion is still very strong, and intelligence and planning and manipulating circumstances for the manifestation of what one thinks the coming civilization should be. These people, they condition the coming civilization outstandingly, including all educational and financial enterprises. Of course, the third ray is involved very much with finance and to a certain extent education, and the sixth ray, the education is narrower, but still there is the involvement of the sixth ray, which so often becomes the second ray, which is the one of the major educational rays. So these rays, they condition the coming civilization outstandingly, including all educational and financial enterprises, just as the influence of those who have soul contact and can express soul quality condition and determine the current culture. The culture is a more refined state. It's more like the pearl that you find within the oyster. It's more under the cultivation of Venus, which is the soul and the higher mind. It's unlikely, except in rare cases, that a third-ray soul will have a third-ray personality. It is, of course, possible, just like he gave the one example of the rather advanced first-ray soul who could have a first-ray personality. It is also unlikely to have the sixth-ray soul and the sixth-ray personality, but they could certainly switch. Sixth-ray souls with third-ray personalities and third-ray souls with sixth-ray personalities. And they certainly want to impress their point of view upon others. And then there is the activity of the fifth principle, that of the mind, and this mind is peculiarly active today in a broad and general sense. If I might put it symbolically, the vertical activity of the mind, which has affected individuals everywhere down the ages, has always produced the mental guides, the directors, and the leaders of humanity. Today, the horizontal activity of the mind, embracing huge masses of the populace and sometimes entire nations and races, I guess it depends on the the soul and personality ray of nations and races. We are in the Aryan race. The fifth ray, therefore, in this fifth root race is very, very important. So the horizontal activity of the mind can everywhere be seen, and this must lead inevitably to events and effects hitherto unvisioned and impossible. Now the masters have a great expanse of vision, and even though to us it may seem that things are going slowly, to them it may not appear that way at all. So what we're looking at here is the changes in connection with the human family, the fourth kingdom of nature, and the acts of God and the acts of humanity itself as they bring their rays into expression. And then the third point, the influence of the outgoing and incoming rays at any time. Well, we're definitely going to be affected by the sixth and seventh rays. Now, I'll tell you, as I look at some of the things going on in Parliament, the House of Commons in the United Kingdom, and going on in Congress, in the House of Representatives and the Senate, I think these two rays are really fighting it out. And, for people like ourselves, we have no question about what the line of progress really is. But other people are definitely confused, and they don't know progress from the retention of the unnecessary. Attachment to that which whose time is past, the time of which is past, is a fertile breeding ground for what we have often called evil. So you have often been told that these events for the emergence or disappearance of a ray influence is an event in time. They are a matter of slow development, are psychic in nature, this change of rays, and are governed by laws. So this is not capricious, this is not a whim. These are things that take time and function under law, and the psyche of the planet is important. The length of time in which a ray appears, manifests and does its work, and finally disappears is one of the secrets of initiation. He has hinted, of course, as to what those cycles are, but as time elapses and the nature of time itself is better understood, so I guess we're not thinking that anything is going to be terribly obvious here, the period and the time equation of the major rays of attribute will be established, but the time is not yet, although the intense interest taken today in the phenomena of time indicates a growing awareness of the problem itself and of the need for understanding the relation of time both to space and to event. It's a big philosophical issue, really. And in order to overcome the first phases of the great illusion, coming to a new understanding of time and space is very necessary. There are calculations in astrophysics and nuclear physics which seem to show time moving backwards, and others who insist that this is a type of structuring phenomenon that can only move progressively forward. It will be realized before long that time is entirely a brain event. He does really bring that up, and it's not easy to understand. I always find it easier to understand space somehow than time, but it is possible to negate space and to negate time. And in our webinars where we're doing identification as being, this is one of the sections we'll be studying. It will be realized before long that time is entirely a brain event. A study of the sense of speed as registered by the brain, plus the capacity or incapacity of the human being to express this speed, will, when properly approached, reveal much that is a mystery. So let's just say, what have we got here? Yeah. Let's just call it this, considering time as a mystery. And this requires further study of the brain. Now, we know that there are times, events, spans of perception when it seems that time moves very slowly. Psychologically, it seems this way. There are times when it seems that the general flow of time is very rapid. It has something to do with the desire nature and the degree to which you enjoy and become involved in and absorbed by the kinds of activities in which you are participating. But no doubt an understanding which is much deeper than that will emerge. Now eventually I do think we're going to be in something that we call, and it's a wild idea, the superimposition of all times upon each other, so that in a way no time at all has ever passed or will pass when considering the perspective of the absolute, or even the perspective of the absolute deity, a lesser and derivative being. And those things are hard, just like it's difficult to understand a non-causative relationship. Now, a friend of mine and I were having a conversation, how can there be that without a cause? Well, how can there be that which always was and always will be and is the cause only of itself, the self-cause cause of other things. So we have to come into a new appreciation of time and space, and then kind of eliminate them both. Here I was trying to travel on the train 3 weeks ago, and there was some kind of internet, but it would have been extremely frustrating and intermittent. So the next time we certainly do use that word, the next time we get together, we'll deal with what he says about time and space, but I guess what I've arrived at is that all times are equal, even the greatest definite span of time, and all extensions in space are both unreal and equal. And that's quite a statement, because the world of relativity involves the long and the short, and the extensive, and that which is much closer to home. You know, we think the universe is huge, and it is, in a way, but from a different perspective, there's nothing but the absoluteness. And the absoluteness has no real extension. So that's really worth pondering on. It may have an apparent extension, but no real extension. So end of this discussion. And the day is as it says, 2nd of November, and we'll be beginning again on the 9th of November 2019, and resume. Now, what I'd like to suggest, is wherever there are books that have been commented upon, I guess we all have our own comments, you would go to www.makara, M-A-K-A-R-A, .us, and you could download the commentary that I have provided for you over the years. I'd like to, keep that process going if possible, because, the study groups, and this is essentially a study group, can be very informative and can give the different perspectives that may open a door of perception for one of us. Not that we need to get caught in all the phenomena and phantasmagoria of the astral plane, but that the reality of these subtle spheres can dawn upon us. So that's enough of that, I think. And, I'm tempted, of course, to keep reading, but we do have to somehow understand what we can absorb. Now it's time for some meditation. And the main thing is, I think, that we are interior workers. Maybe some of us have worked in the field of government, or have been educators in political science, or, students in those fields. But that's not the general rule. The general rule is we're working on the inside to see a more desirable outer form emerge. Now, of course, we have to work with the soul of our nation. Let's just review for a moment, have a little absorption of white light. One of the varieties of soul light. Of course, it comes in the other orange, light orange kind of wavelength. Orange being the predominant color of the egoic lotus. But the idea is that we are more souls, more sensitive souls than we are personalities. And that's a very interesting thought, I think. So we have to see our way clear to understanding the soul, identifying as a soul, functioning as a soul, and bringing soul light to bear on many problems and issues which will appear to us if we are careful in our meditation and really want the best for humanity. All of this is done. We know the great Lord is at such sacrifice to Him, planning to reappear in such a way that, as the prophecy tells us, every eye shall see Him. And as I've said, and the Tibetan has hinted, yet who will recognize Him for what He is? Even the high grade of spiritual study and learning militates against singling Him out as the great Lord, the head of the hierarchy. There's something in the human consciousness that demands the constant feeding of miracles to convince the understanding. But in the future, the miracles will no longer be, we're told, for the outer people and those who try to solve everything on the outer plane, but will be more for the convinced disciples and aspirants who can steady themselves. So let us say this meaningfully as if we contact the Christ. We have gathered in your name, Lord Maitreya, be with us. Now I suppose the question arises, what do we owe to our country? If we really begin to think deeply about it, especially those of us who are living in modern Western countries, the country has provided so very much of a basis for our progression. But you know, we kind of take it for granted. So if we meditatively adopted at this point the attitude of gratitude, as they say, to our country, what would we see that our country has provided for us? And if we are, of the grateful type, no doubt we will see things that have come to us, whether through a standard of living or through adequate food or through roads and transportation systems and through adequate health care and reasonable education, all kinds of things that have been provided because we have gathered together in the various nations, especially at this time the more developed nations, though the developing nations will have their gifts as well. And, perhaps it is a part of patriotism, the love of country, to think about those gifts of the fatherland or the motherland, or, however it's looked. And spend a moment or two of gratitude reinforcing those positive developments in our particular nation. Let's do that. Let's have a moment or two where we reinforce the positive energies that have come to us and to others as a result of the character of our particular nation. And what would a truly grateful, patriotic attitude be? I mean, we are born in many different places, all according to the wisdom of the soul, which has prevision and also a kind of vision that looks developmentally backwards. We are sent to various nations for various purposes. Maybe those qualities need to be more built into our own causal body. What do you think you owe your nation, if anything? Now, do you think it's a worthwhile attitude to consider oneself, in a way, a spiritual patriot of your nation? Is it something to which you'd be willing to give a little time every day? thinking of your patriotism and your ability to help build your nation, what would you do? Now, I'm having a suggestion that the creative imagination can be used to curb the worst excesses of the personality and to strengthen, vivify, build in, refine, express the qualities of the soul ray and the motto of your nation. Now, not all of the nations are given a motto yet, because some of them were more in the developmental stages or heading in a new direction, but certain of the greater nations, long established, or great population centers, were given a motto which one has to ponder over. Maybe your nation has a motto such as we see here. There's quite an attack these days against the second-ray nations, the ones who have the soul on the second ray. I'm thinking here of Great Britain or United Kingdom and the United States. Right now that's going on. And since those are two of the great conditioning nations, or collections of nations, along with Russia, whose soul ray is the same as the ray accompanying the Aquarian energy for the next 2,500 years, and it seems to be, from this list at least, the only one that has that seventh ray soul that he actually gave, although the Scandinavian countries, I think, are good candidates for that. We have to deal with the attack. And how do we do it? I think the dedicated use of the creative imagination to see the imagined archetype of our particular nation establishing itself over and above the limited and often selfish conditioning is a way to go. Sometimes the use of color, the color of the ray that conditions the soul of our nation, and sometimes the use of pitch, the Om sung on the pitch, which conveys the soul ray of our nation. But the key is we do have a responsibility, and we have to work inwardly. No choice in these perilous times, really, if we want to really help. So why not, for the moment, select your nation and its ray, if given, its soul ray, or what you think it may be, and see some kind of dynamic, imaginative process in the works that will lead more and more towards the development of your national causal body in the right direction, and the expression of the energies which carry the archetype of your nation. Let's spend a few moments using the dynamic, creative imagination in this way. And of course we can do this on a somewhat daily basis. All nations have had their great moments and their great people who were not selfish and who stood for something that would make their nation really better. Maybe we can see those people in action. Maybe we can see and understand what they gave to their nation. For instance, maybe I can speak of Lincoln for the United States, who was a racial avatar, as DK says, evoked by the very soul of his nation. I could speak of what DK called that great disciple, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, an Aquarian person who had the Virgo, the sign of labor, on his ascendant. And also Lincoln was an Aquarian as well, having, I think, Sagittarius on his ascendant. They left something indelible in the national psyche, and if you think about better examples in your own nation, you'll find them. And to reinforce what they gave is a good idea at this time when higher values are threatened. So friends, do work with your creative imagination. Do be selfless as much as possible. Don't look for selfish advantage the way partisan systems seem to function, each looking for triumph over the other without thinking of the welfare of the whole. Our interior work as part of the Ajna Center of Sanat Kumara, if we are, let us say, members of the new group of world servers, this interior work is very important at this time. And all for the sake of the Christ, whatsoever shall be asked in his name, with faith in the response, we'll see it accomplished. So we selflessly ask, invoke, on behalf of the divine plan and the great teacher, we're given the assurance that it will be fulfilled. To close, I'd like to play Great Invocation number 1, which sounds the note of goodwill and was given in the 1935-36 at a very successful time for the promotion of goodwill within the human race. We really need it now, and the end to this ridiculous competition looking for some kind of egoistic triumph over the others. The search for power through manipulation has to go. And the spirit of peace, the avatar of synthesis, the Buddha, surrounding the Christ, these are the important energies upon which we can draw now.